You're about to hear a very special story. It's called The Story of Life. A tiny drop was created. It was like water, but not quite. It was jelly-like. It was so tiny that it couldn't be seen. In order to exist, it needed the power to eat, grow, and reproduce. These jelly-like creatures were told that they had to follow these commands: eat, grow, and create. These creatures were like tiny machines that cleaned the seas. They ate the salt, and that's how they made their bodies. Some, however, became itchy, and so they built shells for protection. And when they died, the shells fell to the bottom of the sea. Time passed, and creatures lived and died. Gradually, layers of mud developed on the bottom of the sea made up of tiny shells. They were like pages of a book, the book of the earth. Some pages remained to give us our story. These little machines were made up of only one cell, which had to do all the work. They had to breathe, eat, excrete. It cleaned water as it traveled in the sea. Time went by, and some of these one-celled creatures decided to join together to do a better job. Therefore, bigger creatures came into existence. Each one was made of many cells. They too grew and created. This went on. Then some said, we'd better each have our own jobs. So some cells joined together to take care of eating. Others joined to take care of breathing. Others for movement, and so on. This is how we get creatures with legs, mouths, brains, hearts, basically with organs. Here we see creatures with arms to catch animals. This creature, found in many seas, the trilobites, like our lobsters, came in many forms and sizes. Some have tails, others don't, some big, some small. All these animals appeared as time went on. Some look like trees, but they're really animals. They're built of little rings of stone made of salt. One ring built on another. They had feathery arms waving in water to catch food. They were colorful and looked like flowers. They were called sea lilies. When they died, stone rings fell to the bottom of the sea. There were some creatures that made their own food from sunlight, water, and air. The seaweed. They drifted. One day they wondered what it would be like to live on land. So they drifted up there. They found great sunlight, water washed up, and found air they needed. They liked it on land, and they remained. Others, similar to them, joined them, and so plants came for the first time to land. New life at the same time appeared. This new life had a rod inside. Before, the hard part was outside. It was here that we saw the first animal with an internal skeleton. First, the fish came. However, it was a very different fish from our fish. There were many experiments in nature. They would lie in the mud waiting for food to come drifting by. Then land began to rise up, so parts of the sea were closed off, and where there wasn't rain, the seas dried up. Some fish were trapped in that water, so they decided to keep a moist sac in their bodies to breathe outside the water. It worked. This was the first of the animals that could breathe out of water. These were animals that lived partly in and partly out of the water. The amphibians. Their fins became legs to live on land. They also brought the first sound to land. Before, there'd only been the sound of wind and waterfalls. Therefore, the first voice was the croaking of a frog. Amphibians enjoyed living on land because plants were also now on the land. Insects too had come, so there was plenty of food. Amphibians grew in great variety of sizes. One problem was the way the skin was made, and they needed to live and lay eggs in the water. If they wanted to move farther away from the water to get to other places, they couldn't. So they developed a special skin which wouldn't dry up. And this is when the reptiles also developed. They had a shell for their eggs. Now the problem was solved because they could travel about. So these were the reptiles. With all the plants and the amphibians, reptiles had a good time. Reptiles grew and grew because no one opposed them. Some were enormous. One grew to over 80 feet from head to tail. It had 2 brains. It needed one for the head and one for the tail. Another dinosaur, which was very ferocious, grew 2 stories tall. How land trembled when these 2 dinosaurs fought. Reptiles ruled the earth. Also, there were small animals, and they were afraid of the reptiles. They fled to cold fringes, and because they were so small, they didn't need much food, and they robbed the dinosaur eggs. These small animals developed hair and warm blood to protect themselves from the cold. These were the birds and the mammals. They carried eggs inside their bodies, but the birds built nests because they couldn't fly as they held on to their eggs. One parent always would have to stay and take care of the eggs. Mammals, on the other hand, had to keep them inside until the young were ready to come out. Once born, they cared for them and nurtured their young. They also gave them milk, and this was very new. So now we're at the time of the mammals. The climate changed. It became very cold. The reptiles, since the poor things didn't have fur, died. Not all, but some. Now was the time for the mammals to grow big. Big elephants and huge pigs. Mammals had a great time. The weather got colder and colder, and ice was even developed. Animals walked over the ice to find warmer weather, and plants and other animals, and so on. In the end, the large mammals died and did not last. In the end, a new animal came to exist. No fur, no claws, no sharp teeth, but it had a larger brain with the power to think, to imagine, an enormous amount of love, which made it different from any other animal. It loved not only his children, but all children, even those who didn't belong to him or hadn't even seen. This being was man. All this had to happen before man was created. At any other time, it would have been impossible for man to survive. If earth could speak, it would say, I have spread a thick carpet of grass so you have a soft ground to walk on. I have put flowers in my hair and covered myself with jewels. My cupboards are full with milk and honey, meat and vegetables. In the cellar, there is coal and iron. Now that all is ready, it's time for you to come.